Agenda? Oh, did you say Rainey on roll call?
Oh, I thought I did. Rainey?
Here?
All right, thank you. Still a quorum. Okay, sorry about that. Do we have, does anyone want to make a motion about the agenda?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second. All right, motion made by Kiefhofer, seconded by Yazzie.
Kiefhofer?
Aye.
DeHaven?
Aye.
Spurl?
Aye.
Rainey?
Aye.
Yazzie?
Aye.
Dobry?
Aye.
Medina?
Aye. All right, we'll move on to item number 2 on our agenda, the consent agenda. The listing under consent agenda is a group of items to be acted on with a single motion and vote. This agenda is designed to expedite the handling of limited routine matters by City Council. Either the public or a council member may request that an item may be removed from the consent agenda at this time prior to council's vote. Would anyone in the public or on council like to remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion? Otherwise, do we have a motion? Oh, no, I need to read it first, sorry. Any change? No? Okay. A, approval of the council work session and agenda minutes for September 27th, 2022. B, approval of the expenditure list for October 11th, 2022. C, approval of a retail marijuana cultivation facility for THA Corporation, DBA, The Herbal Alternative at 10194 Highway 491, Cortez. D, approval of a renewal tavern liquor license for Purple Sage Rib Co. and Saloon LLC, DBA Purple Sage Rib Company, located at 2591 East Main Street, Cortez. E, approval of a renewal beer and wine liquor license for Jody Jarling, DBA Zoo Gallery, located at 48 West Main Street, Cortez. And F, approval of a change in premise application for Blondie's Trophy Room LLC, DBA Blondie's Trophy Room, located at 45 East Main Street, Cortez.
I move to approve all items in the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, motion made by Rainey and seconded by Dobry.
DeHaven?
Aye.
Dobry?
Aye.
Kiefhofer?
Aye.
Rainey?
Aye.
Spurl?
Aye.
Yazzie?
Aye.
Medina?
Aye. All right, we'll move on to item 3 on our agenda, public participation. Apologize. There's no limit to the number of speakers, although public comments will be held to an overall time limit of 30 minutes. Speakers have a time limit of 3 minutes per person, may only speak once, and may not cede time to another commenter. And again, for those who have maybe not participated in public comment, since our changes, we do have public comment cards to fill out prior. Nothing? All right. Guess we're moving along. Okay, thank you. We'll close the public comment section and move on to four on our agenda, presentations. 4A is the Montezuma Cortez High School girls and boys golf team. They'll be presented with a donation contributed by our city employees during their annual golf tournament. Okay, yeah, so we'll kind of table that item for now. Okay. All right, then we'll move on to 4B on our agenda under presentations. It's a presentation regarding the current city debt position and possible debt retirement.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm approaching you this evening to discuss the possibility of retiring our city debt. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, thank you. So this is something that's been a long time in the making. I think we're in a position now where this makes sense to do. This is, it's kind of a touchy situation because, you know, there are some risks involved, but I think the benefits of retiring our debt are going to outweigh that. Tonight, Council, I'd like to present this to you and make the case for retiring our city debt. Sorry, I'm not sure. There we go. All right, so here's our current position. City of,
Wait, yeah,
Oh my
we
gosh,
want
I
to see
killed
it
it.
on the,
duplicate. Okay, good. There we go, okay. All right, anyway, the city of Cortez, we have 5 outstanding loans left with an aggregate outstanding balance of $3.653 million. And that'll be the number at the end of fiscal year '22. Now, in fiscal year 2021, we retired the debt on the recreation center, which was an annual debt service payment of $600,000. And we also will retire a smaller loan this year, so that will leave us with a total of the 5 loans. Each of our 5 loans, those are all now for water-related projects, and each of those is being serviced by either the Water Enterprise or the Hydroelectric Enterprise. And right now, our debt service payment for fiscal year '23, remember, this is kind of like your house payment. The payment stays the same, but interest, you start off paying way more interest, and then that interest comes down, and then principal starts going up. But we still have a debt service now of $407,537. Remember that as of last year, it was actually $600,000 added to that annually. But we're down to this 407, and of that, 193,215 is our interest payment alone. So here's our loans of greatest concern to me. Although we have these 5 outstanding loans, the first one, our oldest loan, originated in 1986. It's a 60-year term, and it was for $3.44 million for a water project. This has the highest interest rate of 6.6% interest, and also has the highest principal rate right now, and it's currently, the principal on that is $2,684,581, and of course that goes up literally daily. So during the past 36 years, we have paid over $9 million in interest on this thing, and we have yet to retire even $1 million in principal. And to top all that off, we still have 24 years remaining on this loan. Secondly, our Hydroelectric Enterprise, that's the one where we got a 20-year loan on that. We set up to sell the power for 10 years. I think the intent was possibly to renegotiate that in 10 years, thinking that might go up, but in reality that went down. So now, even though we're generating electricity, it is broken down at the moment, it is not generating enough revenue to even service the debt on it, and our current balance is $449,000. So right now, as of yesterday, I projected the deficit for fiscal year '23 to be $54,549 in that enterprise alone. So here, and I'm sorry this is so small, but anybody who wants a copy of this is more than welcome to have this. Council, I think I've provided some of this to you already, but I'm going to just leave it up here and just make some small comments at the bottom. The totals there that talks about what our principal and interest is, and that which is $278,202, which is our principal payment alone. $193,216, as I mentioned, is our interest payment, which equals that $471,000 a year. So that's where we come up with the annual payment on it for right now. So, council, here's our options. We can really do nothing, just maintain course and speed and just keep servicing this debt. However, the consequences of that is we pay this outrageous amount of interest, especially where we have 24 years left on the one loan. We stand to pay probably, it's actually a little over $3 million just on that loan. Our second option is to pay additional principal year over year as resources allow, but the reality is our resources probably won't allow all that much, at least not enough to move the needle on that. Or number 3, retire the debt in a single year, and that's actually the recommended option that we take. Under this proposed plan, of course, I'm suggesting to council that we appropriate in the fiscal year 2023 budget an appropriation of $3.7 million to retire the debt. Now remember, 3.6 is roughly our number, 3.65. Remember, it's kind of like your house payment. You're probably paying, some people are paying right now, probably, between $50 and $100 a day almost of just interest in some respects. So as we're speaking, that's accruing interest by the time we get to pay it off. Just to be safe, I'm asking for the 3.7 million because there's going to be accrued interest in there. Once we take that out of the general fund, then the water enterprise and the hydroelectric power enterprise would, over time, reimburse the general fund for those amounts with some reasonable interest added in there. So basically, we're essentially refinancing it, just using general fund monies to do that. The terms would be shorter, the interest payments would be less, and you know, over time, we would still make the general fund whole again, which has to happen, but it also benefits these two enterprises. And then as part of this also, council, I'm proposing that we be granted permission to just flat out decommission that hydro plant. I think we spent an exorbitant amount last year, fiscal year 21. It is now broken again, and I think there's, if I recall, it's in the area of $50,000 I think we need to come up with just to fix this thing, just to get it running again, and chances are the electronics are old enough, it's just gonna break again. So I would like to get permission from council to do that. Here's the risks and consequences. Well, under Colorado law, the water enterprise and the hydroelectric enterprise would have to lose their enterprise status in 2024. So if we paid general fund money to support that in 23, in 24 it would lose the enterprise status. But the beauty of it is it's only exposing for 1 year versus several years if we were to try to add extra money to it, and it would only apply to these enterprises. Some of the other outcomes and consequences there's always unforeseen circumstances. There's always those black swans that are out there. Hopefully we can avoid that. And then of course acts of God that can always occur. But those are the main risks and consequences that I see. So we have the money to pay it off. We're in a good enough position to do that. I am recommending to council that we be granted authority and be given that appropriation so that we can ultimately retire this debt and put us on a better financial footing as a city. That's all I have. Does council have any questions?
Can you go back to the slide where it talks about the water and the hydro enterprise paying back?
Yes.
Okay, how is the hydro enterprise going to pay back when we're basically decommissioning
Well, just
the
in the
hydro
existing
plant?
funds it has in there, it's not much. It's only, it's all that's left in there. So it would just essentially drain that down to nothing.
Okay, and then we would, if I recall correctly, we'll collapse that enterprise account.
Correct. That enterprise would go away, should you grant us permission to decommission and you know, put that aside. It'll retire.
And is there any chance to kind of part out any of the hydroelectric plant potentially, or is
That's
it just?
a fantastic question. We have thought about that. We have done a lot of work to try to sell the hydro plant, do something with it. Well, we learned that that is designed custom for the job. Wherever those are put in, they are custom for that location. There's nothing we can do with it. I was really hopeful that we could. There's just not.
I guess want to say to the public that, and Drew knows this pretty well, that I've been really pretty vocal, I think, about my desire to see that debt canceled, especially the one from 1986. I think it's ridiculous, and I think that we're throwing money down the toilet. And when I think about my personal finances, that's something I would never do. So I don't think that it's the right move for the city to continue paying towards that debt long term.
And I'll just expand on that if you'll go back to the pink slide, because you didn't mention the total amount, which is in the bottom right corner. Of if we went throughout the total life of the debt of that loan, we would be owing $15 million and at $15.7 million, and that is a complete disservice to the city. We should not have paid $9 million in interest for the loan from whatever year that was. Yeah, 1986.
Yeah. And understand that $15 million, that's for the life of the loan, so everything we have paid and would pay, those combined. So, but also, and I think it's important here to point out that the circumstances that I think the city found itself in the 80s, 90s, and even in the 2000s, I would argue that they were struggling an awful lot. They needed these loans. It was what they probably had to do at the time to survive and make sure the city had things. I hesitate to be critical virtually at all. I wasn't in their shoes. However, we are in a position now, and we are very blessed because we now are in a position where that has been paid down enough and we have the resources to retire it. Now I think it's our responsibility to follow through with that.
Yeah, I think it's important for the public to know too, and I know this, that we are not gutting the general fund, and we're not going to leave us in a position where we can't sustain. This is money that's available to us now because we've done well, and I think it's money that we should spend to save us money.
And I would second that as well. I did have one question just about the structure of the payback. Would that be through a promissory note from the enterprise to the general fund? Is that what we would be looking at?
Yeah, Mayor and Councilmember Dobry, that's exactly right. So should this get appropriated, which would take place in the first meeting of, presumably, first meeting of November, after that, then we will come in to council with a promissory note to get that all set up, much like we did at the first of 22 with CCN, if you recall. We did the exact same thing. So yes, that's a great question.
And the goal would be to pay off all that debt as soon into FY23 as possible. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And understand on this that it's complicated enough and trying to put everything together. It's probably going to take a couple months to be able to get everything together and pay this off. Unfortunately, these things are complicated enough that it's not just that easy of writing a check. So Finance Department is on it. I will also mention that our Finance Director, Kelly Koski, has already prepared amortization tables for this, and she is projecting 15-year payoff back to the general fund.
Is there any penalty for early payoff on any of these?
No, we have already checked on that, and the answer is no.
All right, thank you so much, Drew, and thank you, Matt, for bringing that up and making that a priority for our council. You know, we have a responsibility to make these financial decisions and take care of the finances of our community, and we're pretty blessed that we can pay this off and not, you know, waste money over the next, you know, decade or more. And so just to remind the public, this is $3.7 million, so our budget that we're going to approve is going to look a lot bigger than it was last year, but 3.7 of that is paying off this debt, which is going to save us millions and millions of dollars down the road. So I'm really excited that we get to make this financial decision and really help our community and kind of think, you know, help ourselves in the future. So.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
All right. So then that was 4B. How are we doing, Linda? Okay, do we need to do anything to table that? Okay. Okay. All right, then we're going to move on to 5 on our agenda, public hearings. 5A is ordinance number 1312, series 2022. Presented by Jeremy Patton, our airport manager.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. I've got Matt Harmon with Classic Air Medical with me as well. If you guys should have any questions, he's here to answer those questions as well. So as you know, on the 27th of September, we did the first reading for Ordinance 1312, Series 2022, amending Classic Air leases, the lease agreement for the septic area change. Just to go back into that, you know, they're building a hangar sitting on airport properties described in the land lease agreement. They made a change during architectural and engineering to the septic area required for the bunk rooms in that hangar. And that's when we requested via the attorney and myself the change or the amendment to the lease. Just to touch base on the fiscal impact again, the current year lease rate, 39 cents a square foot. We upgraded from 15,800 square feet to 19,200 square feet. The amount has already been paid for the rest of the year. Moving forward on the 40-year land lease, each year's rates will be adjusted per CPI, along with all of our other tenants list. So with this second reading and public hearing, barring any questions or concerns, comments from you guys or the public, staff requests that council adopt on second reading the ordinance to amend Classic Air's lease agreement series, or ordinance 1312 series 2022.
All right, do we have any questions? I'll go ahead and open this up to public comment. Would anyone from the public like to make a comment on this particular agenda item? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public comment section. Can I just ask a few questions about Classic Air Medical?
Sure.
You know, so how many people will you employ, and then how many people do you serve, or I guess, what does your year look like?
Yeah, sure, no worries. So we've been here almost 2 years now. We started off with a rotor operation with a helicopter located over at Southwest Memorial Hospital. We recently added, on the 1st of July, a fixed-wing asset to the community as well. So we have a PC-12 Pilatus airplane as well as a helicopter here in Cortez. The airplane's going to be based at the airport. Of course, we need a hangar for that to protect it, especially during the wintertime. So that brought into that change. We currently staff 2 full medical crews, which is a 3-person crew, so 6 individuals on duty at any given time, 3 for the helicopter, 3 for the airplane, as well as our staff duty mechanics, which we keep 2 mechanics on station, 1 for the airplane, 1 for the helicopter. So 8 people at a time, rotating shifts, 365 days a year. Just like a fire department or an ambulance service, you know, we are an air asset of 911.
Great. Well, thank you so much for helping our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
All right, do we have any more discussion or any questions for him?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve on second and final reading ordinance number 1312, Series 2022, authorizing and approving an amendment to the ground lease with Classic Air Medical for construction of an aircraft hangar at the Cortez Municipal Airport.
Second.
All right, motion made by Dobry and seconded by DeHaven.
Excuse me, Yazzie,
Aye.
Kefauver,
Aye.
Dobry,
Aye.
Spurl,
Aye.
DeHaven,
Aye.
Rainey,
Aye.
Medina.
Aye. All right, thank you.
Thank you, council. Moving on.
Okay, we're going to move on to number 6 on our agenda. We have no unfinished business, so we'll move on to number 7, new business. 7A is a bid award for 2022 jury room edition, presented by Rick Smith, our General Services Director.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. The 2022 city budget provides $125,000 for the construction of a jury room for the municipal court, which is basically right behind that wall over here in the unfinished part of City Hall. The city contracted with Reynolds Ash and Associates, architects. They are the same ones that designed our current building, so they had all of the CAD drawings and all that, so it was real easy for them to come up with the design. We opened bids on September 26th, and we only received 1 bid. That was from WCA Construction LLC. You might know them as Weemanooch Construction, same company that did the remodel here at City Hall. Their bid was $181,250. This amount is $56,250 over the budgeted amount. And due to the delivery of construction materials, this project will be completed in 2023, in other words, next year. City Manager Drew can give you an update on the amount over the budgeted amount.
Yeah, thank you, Rick, Mayor and Council. We were able to make that additional $56,000 as a budget inclusion for 2023. In fact, it's in the capital budget.
Okay, so this was something we didn't have when we had our budget day.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, this came up last week, or I can't remember. It was very recently when we finally got the bid. So it crossed in the mail, as it were. So
Rick, with only getting one bid, can you explain your process to reach out to other bidders? I know it's been an issue in the past, but I do want the community to know the work that you do to make sure that we are getting multiple bids where we can.
Oh, sure. Well, it's a multifaceted thing. First of all, we put all the bids out on BidNet, which if any, in this case, contractors registered, they'll get a copy of the bid notice. Secondly, I contacted Comfort Air because I knew they worked with commercial contractors, and I asked them who are the other contractors in the area, because over the years we've lost a lot of the commercial contractors like Southwest Contracting and Triad, and some of those they've gone away. And they gave me the name of 3 other people, and we emailed those directly to them, so we were sure that they received the bid invitation, and of which WCA was one of them, Wimmanuch. And we had a pre-bid. Only one company showed up with a pre-bid. So, yeah.
I think this might have been a question for you before the last time we had like a project that needed bidding out, but like, I guess from your perspective, like, why do you think they are not bidding? Like, are we under, like, in terms of our project, are we not accounting for like how much the cost of materials and stuff and such are? I'm just curious, I guess.
Well, one of my theories on it is this is a relatively small commercial project. We're basically building a small jury room. So the commercial people, they tend to want to do the big buildings like this whole size of City Hall. I think that's like 450 square feet. And then there just isn't that many people doing commercial work right now. And I don't really have a good answer for you. I've never seen things quite like this in everything I'm dealing with.
Well, and to follow up on what Arlena was asking is like, how come the bid came in so much higher than what we anticipated the cost to be?
I don't know, other than the cost of materials have gone up. One item that may have impacted it, and that we had to do an addendum, and that is because it's commercial and by code, we had to extend the fire sprinkler system. And I'm not sure that was in the original bid estimate. But those guys are expensive when you have to get those subs in here to do those fire systems.
Okay, that makes sense.
I know beyond this project, beyond the jury room, there is some other work that at some point we'll be doing over on that side of the building. Is it possible in the future to do that project in phases and get a contractor on for multiple phases that would maybe go through multiple years, so we kind of can tie someone in to do the work for us?
That's an interesting thing. We did include those phases in the capital budget process, and we could combine multiple phases, for example, and get a bigger project, and I'm sure we'd get more interest in the bid process. However, we just flat didn't have the funding to combine it all together. I think this is technically phase 1 of 5 phases to build out this back side of the room, or excuse me, the building.
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to award the 2022 jury room addition to WCA Construction LLC at the bid amount of $181,250.
Second.
All right, motion made by Yazzie, seconded by DeHaven.
Dobry,
Aye.
Kiefhoffer,
Aye.
DeHaven,
Aye.
Rainey,
Aye.
Yazzie,
Aye.
Spurl,
Aye.
Medina.
Aye.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, we're going to move on to 7B on our agenda, ordinance number 1305, Series 2022, presented by our contract city planner, Nancy Dawsdahl. All right, this is in regard to food trucks. So.
Okay, so this is the first reading, so not a full public hearing yet, but we have been talking about this, food trucks, for a number of months now. Had a work session back, I believe, in May. Planning Commission went over it for quite a bit. Just to remind everyone, what's going on is that food trucks in Cortez are generally allowed everywhere in the city, with the exception of the Central Business District. This map here highlights the Central Business District, and the pink is not in, but the other colors are in the Central Business District. Small block area are the traditional downtown for Cortez. We did public outreach, and in this case, I think we got a lot of response. I think there were 372 responses. I want to caution you, however, that we did this public outreach. It was online. We also did a lot of it at a public event where food trucks were present. So we feel like we had a little bit of a biased public, but they were super supportive of having food trucks, super supportive of having food trucks in the Central Business District with very limited regulations as far as, so this was, should we allow them in the Central Business District? Blue is there. Where should they be allowed? We got a real heavy response on Central Business District. And then we asked and prefaced it with that in the past, brick and mortar restaurants in the district had expressed concern with food trucks locating near them. And do you still support it, and what type of regulations? And our biggest response there was no restrictions. Based on that, and of course I guess I didn't start it, but the city initially investigated this after requests from the farmers market that wanted to have food trucks. Seems kind of reasonable. So what else did we do? We went out and looked at some other communities to see how they were regulating them. There was a mix. Some allow them in the Central Business District. Most have some restrictions on how close they might be to other restaurants. And then most of them require the licenses and permits and such that Cortez does. I didn't go back to this. So after the public outreach that was overwhelmingly in favor, we thought we should do some directed outreach to downtown business owners. So when we did that, I don't have it electronically. But with targeted outreach to downtown business owners, you see this at the top, it says no. We asked them with stickies where they should be allowed, and the red stickies are not here. Green stickies are, that might work. Okay. So, and I think you'll see there's concentration around where the farmer's market is, and have concerns with a food truck pulling up perhaps and parking in front of their business. Seems somewhat reasonable. So, based on all of that, we held public hearings, public outreach, public hearings with the Planning Commission, and we have come up with somewhat of a compromise here that would address some of the public desire for food trucks downtown, but also, I think, protect the businesses, since we have such a disparate comment on those. And this is what was recommended by the Planning Commission after their public hearings. So what we would do is, that's existing 3.05 is amended to, instead of not allowing mobile vendors totally in the central business district, it comes up with two options, just to over-summarize, is that at an approved temporary special event, such as the third Thursdays or the farmer's market, mobile vendors would be allowed as long as they're not parked in public right-of-way or or public roads. In other words, we don't want them parking on the highway. Main Street there is the highway. CDOT would not allow it, but they would be allowed at the special events. So that would solve the farmer's market problem. Maybe if there were other special events that went through a permitting process and were allowed, you could have food trucks there during the special event only. The other idea was to allow a conditional use permit process that would allow a vendor to be in a site for up to 90 days. Remember, our conditional use permit process we talked about earlier is about a 3-month public process. It's public, neighbors are notified, it goes hearings in front of the Planning Commission and City Council. So in other words, more likely you would set up somewhat of a more long-term food court kind of thing. There were 2 identified vacant lots where the owners expressed interest in doing that, and some of the business owners were not as concerned with that kind of thing. If we had a conditional use permit, at least they would be able to weigh in at the public hearing and have a full review of the idea of having a more temporary permanent food truck location. I think you could also, under the conditional use permit, perhaps approve one of those vacant lots for a food court where they could maybe switch out the users like it happens in some other cities. So that's what we've got for you. We've set it up for perhaps a public hearing as soon as 2 weeks from now. But we understand it's a big change, and there's concerns either way. There's support, but there's also some concern. So we're here to take your comment and make adjustments should you wish.
Can I ask how the 90 days was determined?
A summer season, kind of.
Okay, sounded like a good number.
You could move that. You could change that
Okay.
how you wish, yeah.
Okay, can I ask about process when you all went to get feedback from the business district? Did you carry that paper around to all the businesses and have them put stickers on?
No, they all came here.
Or they all came here?
No, they
Or-
came here,
Okay.
but there was very directed outreach where city staff actually went downtown with flyers and say, y'all come. And I think we had close to 50 people at that meeting, so it was super well attended.
So I attended that meeting, and a lot of restaurant and business owners came. And so I think for folks who can't see that map, what it highlights is that the business owners were mostly concerned about the right-of-way. They didn't want food trucks taking up their parking and compromising their, where their customers can park. It was not that they're against food trucks, they don't want it to interfere with their business. So that's where those stickers really are. So I think this is allowing, like, on private and public property, and then during special events, just not in the right-of-way. I think that was just the biggest concern, and that's what those maps highlight.
Nancy, I appreciate that you went to a couple of different municipalities. Did you reach out to Dolores or Mancos to see? I know in Dolores they have like a food truck Friday and a lot of food trucks up there.
You know, I don't recall whether we did or not.
Okay, I was just curious if
It
they
was
have an
back in
ordinance or they're
May.
just doing it. They
Yeah.
might just be doing it.
I reached out to Dolores today, and the owner where they do the food trucks is on private property, and I wasn't able to figure out if they have any official ordinances.
I do have Mancus's. Theirs is, they must have a current Mancus business license. The food truck must be parked on private property or in a park that's rented. They must pay sales tax, and they must be regulated by the health department, you know. Very similar to what we're kind of proposing.
That was one thing I was going to ask is do we have those other requirements for a mobile vendor in the current zones where they're already allowed? Do you have to be a sales tax license? Do you have to have appropriate food licensing?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So if someone wanted to have one of these vacant lots downtown that's private property, say they wanted to set up their food truck every Friday for the year, could they do that? You know, because of the 90 days, is it consecutive? Is it, would they have to get on our agenda every 2 weeks, you know, I guess would they have to do a permit for every week? How would that look?
I'd kind of like to see that if there's a piece of private property that wants to do mobile vending and that business wants to come in and do it every Friday, then I feel like we shouldn't have to make more hoops for them to jump through. If they get the 90 days, they get the 90 days.
Yeah, and I think with a conditional use permit, you can apply appropriate conditions. So I guess you could say 90 days, not to exceed 90 days. But 90 days wasn't magic. I mean, if you want it to be 100 days or 120 days, whatever works. And you could set that up to say only on weekends or we did hear a lot of public comments about, wow, I'm downtown and the restaurants are closed, and wouldn't it be great if after hours I could get a hot dog or whatever after I've been drinking, and all those things could be looked at through a conditional use permit.
That wasn't me that she asked.
Yeah, it was. No, it was an anonymous survey.
Well, oh, go ahead.
Oh, so if, did you guys reach out to Moab at all? Because they have a food truck like court.
I'm thinking I
downtown.
looked at Moab's, but I don't recall exactly, so.
Okay, so if someone wants to do like a food truck court thing on private property, at that point, could those vendors stay there longer than 90 days, or?
Yeah, it
how-
seems kind
how-
of cumbersome.
It seems cumbersome
If
to
they
me.
have to do it
Yeah.
every year, if they want to have mobile vending on their own private
And it's private
piece of property, it seems kind of cumbersome to have to make that property owner, I'm assuming, come in and apply for that permit.
Could we do just a permit for the year? You know, once a year they have to renew their permit? How much does that cost?
Absolutely, yeah. It's, I don't remember, $300?
And that permit goes to the mobile food vendor, not to the property, is that correct?
Well, I guess I would think that the property owner would at least have to sign the the permit, and it would probably be most appropriate for the property owner to get it, and then it would allow them to maybe switch out food trucks?
My one concern with that would be, would there be any requirements about providing bathroom facilities if you're creating a de facto restaurant in a parking lot and you don't have to have a building? I would have some concerns about that use getting pushed onto neighboring businesses. But, I mean, if someone were to build something kind of along the lines of like 11th Street in Durango, where there are facilities and it's a set-up system, I think that's something that we would want to look at, but I don't know that we would want to control that through this, I guess is kind of what I'm wondering with that.
I mean, could we require them to provide facilities, like via a porta-john or actual built structure?
Well, and again, the intent of a conditional use permit is to mitigate impacts. I think bathroom's a big one, and yes, you could do that through the use permit.
And I want to clarify, like, that we're talking about something separate than like a special event, you know, because a special event
A special event, they come in, set it up, and probably special events are going to have porta potties, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Or
we
public
have
restrooms.
the restrooms in Montezuma Park, but we'd have to look into all of that. But a lot of downtowns seem to have like some type of public facilities. So you might have answered this, but I just want to make sure I understand clearly. Like for the farmers market, since they would want a weekly permit, would they be able to do one for like the year?
Well, so we wrote it that the farmer's market would not have to apply for a conditional use permit. They're permitted for a special event. The special event permit lets them pull in the food trucks along with the porta potties. In fact, you know, when we were at Thursdays, there were food trucks there, and I believe they were probably in the,
Montezuma Park's in neighborhood business where it's allowed.
well, they were across the alley in the, yeah, so it might not, it may have been that they were in the central business district.
Yeah, I think that they were, but, you know, we don't want to split hairs, I guess, in that regard.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think to go back to the point that, you know, these vendors have to go through health department rules and licensing with the city and all those sorts of things. To me, it doesn't make sense to, especially with the farmer's market, the third Thursday, to kind of pile on yet another kind of restriction around it.
And events like that would just have to give a schedule and not have to do it for every event, just like every Saturday for the next 4 months. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I don't know, yeah, it sounds like we want to talk about or make a change to the 90-day thing. So I guess, council, where do we want to go from here?
I could write it to say the term would be set at the time of conditional use permit, but that leaves it open for permanent.
Mayor and council, do you have a suggested number?
Okay, hold on.
I mean, I would like want them to be able to use that space if they have the permissions and they have all of their documentation, use that space whenever they want to. I wouldn't want to constrict it to just the 90 days.
Or
Yeah, I
could-
agree with that.
Or what if we said, like, if it's more than 90 days, must provide bathroom facilities?
I think the bathroom facilities could really be a big deterrent and cumbersome thing, especially if you're not doing 90 days consecutively.
I think if it was more of a food court area, that it would make sense that there would be a porta potty provided at that point. But if they're only there every Friday,
Right.
So I guess I would want to know more about what other communities that allow food trucks do when it comes to bathroom facilities.
Well, and we've had different food vendors set up in that vacant lot on Main, and I don't believe that they've had any sort of facilities there. And it was more of a grab-and-go situation, so I think if you're talking about a food truck that people just come and grab lunch and dinner, and it's not really a hanging out area, it may not be as much of an issue.
I'm inclined to agree with that. Yeah, that makes sense.
So back to your question, Drew, about the 90 days and what folks would want to do. If we do something different than 90 days, do we need to table this and do another first reading with the different language and do a second reading after that?
Correct. If that's the only sticking point with it, I would suggest that maybe the council dialogue it a little bit more and try to give us a better understanding. Otherwise, we're going to probably want to table it, bring it to a workshop, and suss that out, basically, because we want to make sure we get it right in advance. But yes, we would have to do another first reading, which, okay.
Yeah, I think it'd be worth it to workshop it before we move forward.
Yeah, would we have time at our next workshop?
Yes, we would, council.
Okay. Yeah. So I think we're all in favor. This is just about kind of tailoring the language that will make sense for the future. Yeah, because the way it's written is conditional use permit to remain up to 90 days. Yeah, so I think we need to have a discussion about it. So do we need to make any motion to table this, or?
Yeah, you'll need to make a motion, but before you do, Mayor, also I think we'll try to work together to come in with maybe some suggested language to give you perhaps some options. You don't have to take those, but at least some options. So, but yeah, we would need a motion to table.
Okay, because the way it's written, they would need a conditional use permit if they're going to be there more than 90 days? Okay, it's a conditional use permit regardless, but we're just saying we're only allowing it to be up to 90 days. Okay, yeah, so I think that's kind of the main point that we want to talk about.
So if we're changing the language on this, do we actually need to table it or do we deny it? Because we're going to come back and talk about this.
Actually, either one works, but I would just suggest tabling it. I think it's just more clear for our records.
Okay.
And that's what we did with the ADU stuff. All right.
I'll do it. All right. Madam Mayor, I make a motion to table ordinance number 1305, series 2022, an ordinance amending the City of Cortez Land Use Code, section 3.05, food truck mobile vendor, and set a work session for October 25th.
Second.
All right, motion made by Kiefhofer and seconded by Dobry.
Rainey,
Aye.
Spurl,
Aye.
DeHaven,
Aye.
Kiefhofer,
Aye.
Yazzie,
Aye.
Dobry,
Aye.
Medina.
Aye.
Mayor, can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to you all for taking all the effort to reach out to community members and gather feedback. I think it was really helpful for us in determining maybe how we could move forward.
It's really nice to see these requests be moved through the process and brought back to us, so thanks for all your work. All right, okay, so moving on the agenda, 8, no draft resolutions or ordinances. 9, a city attorney report. Oh, did I skip C? Yes. Sorry, I crossed it off on my sheet too early. Okay, sorry. We're going to move on to 7C, ordinance number 1311, series 2022, presented by our contract city planner, Nancy.
Okay, this is another one that may or may not need a work session, but let's go over it. This one came as somewhat as an idea where an affordable housing provider came into to staff to speak about building and could not provide the housing at an affordable rate at the existing code densities. So in this case, they had a 10,000 square foot lot, zoned R2. They wanted to be able to put 4 units on the property, but the density of 6,000 square foot or 33,000 square foot per unit didn't allow 4. It only allows 3. So the concern there was it's something that probably we had already identified at the staff level, that the minimum of 3,000 square feet per dwelling unit is fairly low density. It's 14 units to the acre, give or take, which is the highest density allowed anywhere in the city of Cortez. Generally, most communities would push that up. So the idea here was to add new definitions of affordable housing and workforce housing, and then add a density bonus, essentially, if someone is going to provide actually deed-restricted affordable housing. So we've added 2 new definitions, which would be affordable housing, and we use DOLA's recommendations on a lot of this, that defining affordable housing as housing that is affordable to households with an income that is 80% or lower than the area median income of households of that size. It then goes on to say that the housing developed or co-developed by nonprofit or government or quasi-development organizations whose mission or intent is to provide affordable or workforce housing will meet this definition. So in other words, Habitat for Humanity, it's a nonprofit, but if they came in, we would say, you don't have to do any more to prove to us that this is affordable. It's your mission. You get the density bonus. Nonprofits and governmental organizations that do not intend to hold the property for at least 20 years, and for-profit developers, maybe they could also go after it, would be required to provide assurances that the housing is and will remain affordable for at least 20 years to get the bonus. Okay. We then also added, because that 80% of AMI is generally what's considered low-income housing, but there's a need for not low-income housing. So we added a definition of workforce housing, and with that definition would be between the 80% of AMI and 140% of AMI for households of that size. So we added those same restrictions that if you're a nonprofit or government whose mission is that, we're not going to require any more, but nonprofits that either don't want to hold it or for-profits. We met today with a for-profit developer that wants to do affordable housing, so it's certainly a reasonable idea that that could happen, especially at the 140% of AMI rents or for sale. So you could also qualify with workforce housing. So then what we went is to provide 3 new density categories in the R2, the MH, and the Neighborhood Business District, which are the districts that allow multifamily type development, and add a new category in each of those that says the density would be 2,000 square feet per multifamily dwelling unit for affordable and/or workforce housing. I then went to some examples where affordable workforce housing projects are mixed with market rate projects. The density would be prorated based on the percent of affordable versus market units, with example being a project proposing 10 affordable units and 10 market rate units would achieve an overall density of 2,500 square feet per unit. That's all I got.
Well, thanks for all your work on this. I think this is another great way to approach our housing issue, kind of low-hanging fruit of allowing some more dense stuff to happen.
Shows the larger vacant parcels that are zoned for multifamily units now, so it gives you an idea of what the impact could be if affordable projects were proposed on those parcels. We also, I think in the staff report, gave you some examples of existing development at those densities, because I don't think a lot of people just can eyeball a development and go, that's 14 units to the acre, or that's 18 units to the acre. And I've lost my place, but I think there were some example, so example of the highest density of the 2,000 square foot per unit would be the Adobe Apartments at South Ash and First. Shaking your head. Cedar Terrace at South Cedar Street is also at 2,000 square foot of lot per unit. We've got some other examples here. Sleeping Mute Apartments are at triple that at 6,000 square foot per unit. The new Calkins development is at 3,800 square feet per unit. It might look a little more dense. I think there's a large vacant area in there. Okay.
So is the idea that for a for-profit or a nonprofit that wasn't wanting to hold the property, that it would be through deed restriction? And would any of this create any additional management costs for the city to like ongoing manage this year to year beyond the initial approval?
Probably. If deed restrictions need to be managed, I think if it's a for sale product, it's kind of a one-time thing. We would probably want to work with a current affordable housing group to help manage that, the housing authority perhaps. The hardest part would be if they're rental units, because then you're income qualifying anyone that moves in, and you absolutely need somebody to help manage that.
Out of curiosity, is there, I guess I'm curious as to why a for-profit business is wanting to do affordable. If you have that reasoning, I'd just be curious to know.
Well, I think you might remember the folks that bought the motel, what was that one called? Which one? Mesa Verde Inn. They're for-profit. They feel like they can remodel that into small units. They'll be, in that case, they didn't need a density variance. They did need a couple other variances that were granted. So, I mean, if you can, 140% of AMI, if you can rent at that level, market rate, you'll rent them all day long. So assuming they could build without subsidies, which is what's hardest. of course, yeah, a developer would want to do affordable housing.
And you mentioned that this language that you've incorporated into here is like DOLA, like kind of their language. Were you able to like research any other communities that have incorporated that language and seen a change in the level and amount of development around affordable housing and workforce housing?
What we used that for was the definitions. So the AMI definitions and the levels that we set those at. It is a bit of a trend, and there's some grants going around from DOLA to help communities revise their code to do things like this. I would say there's definitely communities. I worked in one 20 years ago. Summit County, Colorado had density bonuses for affordable projects. I don't know that anyone's got the research done to say, yes, that increased our housing supply by X amount. I can try and look for you.
Just curious. Obviously, if we could make it easier for developers to come in, it would probably entice them to want to come in.
We definitely have one developer who wants to develop on a 10,000 square foot lot, but felt like it's Southwest Housing Solutions. And they came in and said, we can't really afford to do a triplex on this property, but if you could get us a fourplex, it would work. And they wanted a variance. I had concerns with that, a density variance, and suggested that perhaps we pursue a code amendment for density bonus instead.
That was kind of the question I was going to ask, is how consequential you think that these changes would be beyond that one developer. Do you think this will make a difference for other developers in the short and long term?
You know, my experience is you need a little bit more than just a density bonus to push someone with the costs. You heard the costs of construction and the lack of people in the construction industry right now. That's not just Cortez, and it's not just Southwest Colorado, but it's worse here where we have smaller construction companies and less builders. And I also do work with private developers. We had a 200-unit apartment in Durango, all teed up, ready to go. When they went out to get construction costs, they canceled the project last week. So it wasn't affordable. It was going to be a luxury apartments, but they couldn't make it pencil. And you see a lot of that. So I think anything you can do to help make it easier for them to pencil is a good thing.
You mentioned a little bit more. So we're doing density, we're looking at density right now. What is the little bit more that you have seen?
More help? Help with tap fees. Reductions in building permit fees. Even infrastructure improvements. The city, the county might build a sidewalk. I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but those are some pretty common ones.
My one concern with it is about, are we creating a city housing authority that then we have to staff and fund into the future? I mean, it's one thing if like checking these is one thing in an existing in the existing staff's job, but that would be my one concern, is that we're creating something that we're going to be paying for every year forever.
And part of that was why I wrote it, to say, hey, if you're a nonprofit, we're going to trust you.
Can I ask, like, how many housing developers we've had in, like, the last 10 years, if you know?
What do you mean by housing development?
Just, and like, any sort of housing
development?
projects that we've had in the last 10 years. Like, is it overly cumbersome for, like, our planning staff?
So, if I could answer that to some extent, our grant writer did some research, and we, Cortez and Montezuma County has the lowest output of housing. I think it's 0.3% of, compared to surrounding communities. So we haven't been doing a lot of building and keeping up, if that helps answer your question. And part of that is to do with, there was a boom and a bust, and a lot of construction companies changed focus and went out of business, and there wasn't a market for it. And there have been a lot of demographic changes since then. Kids have grown up and needed apartments or places of their own. We've had a lot of retirees move in. We've had, there have been changes like that, and we just haven't kept up.
Thank you. I'm just kind of relating back to Robert's question of are we going to be setting ourselves up for too much, I'm assuming, if we're enabling developers to come in and have a little bit more access with this density. So I guess I'm just curious at the amount of capacity. I mean, obviously there's other development that's happening. There's other things that are coming to planning and zoning, but I'm just curious if we can grow into that. And unless something like a brand new industry comes in, I don't really see Cortez growing at a substantial rate in the next 10, 20 years.
No, my concern was just more about an ongoing relationship between a developer and the city. Every time a unit changes hands, that you now have to check the income level of the people. I mean, and I don't know. I don't know if we could solve that with working with the housing authority. I don't know if they I think only do their own projects, but I don't know if that's something that we could deal with that way. That is not something we've done in the past. I don't know that we know what that would look like. I guess I in some ways would be more comfortable just extending that the trust to the for-profit and short-term, and basically say you need to deed restrict it, but I don't know that I want to staff a housing authority at the city of Cortez.
Yeah, and Mayor and Council, we just don't have the capacity to do it, but it's going to be kind of like other things, kind of like short-term rentals or how many people would be in an ADU and so on. If we get a complaint, we will have to investigate and take action, but somewhat this is going to have to be an on-your-honor system, and we just don't have the capacity to go police it, and really should we? That's a lot of intrusion into people's lives, and especially their finances, so.
And I guess for us, I wouldn't expect us to do that with this type of policy.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking it would be on the nonprofit or the for-profit group that applied, or was constructed the housing.
Well, he brings up a great point, where if you had a rental complex and they're restricting 140% or it's workforce housing, how would you, I think you're right that maybe we should write it and just say deed restrictions will be required and let them enforce. And if somebody complains or we see they're renting them for $1,800 a month or whatever it is, you can go back to them and say, you're violating your land use permit at that point. You're not going to unbuild units.
No, and I'd be a lot more comfortable with that. That's the real concern, is I don't want to build a housing authority. I think our staff is doing what they need to be doing now, and I don't think we need to be trying to grow new departments at the city. So I think if we just limited it to be deed restricted, I would be comfortable with that.
Yeah, so where do we go from here if we want to make some changes? Do we table this as well, or?
Well,
It's actually written to
Yeah,
say
deed
the
restriction.
developers will be required to provide assurances that the housing is and will remain affordable for at least 20 years. So it doesn't say the city's going to check up on you. It says you tell us how you're going to make this stay affordable.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then I think that words well. It's generalized enough, yet specific enough.
It seems worthwhile to move forward to a second reading. And of course, a public hearing.
Yeah. I'd like to
Right,
make
no.
a motion to approve on first reading ordinance number 1311, series 2022, an ordinance amending the City of Cortez Land Use Code, section 2.02, definitions 3.06, 3.09, 3.10, 3.14, to create definitions and increase density in zones for affordable and workforce housing, and set for public hearing on October 25th, 2022.
Second.
All right, motion made by DeHaven and seconded by Kiefhoffer.
Kiefhoffer,
Aye.
Rainey,
Aye.
DeHaven,
Aye.
Yazzie,
Aye.
Dobry,
Aye.
Spurl,
Aye.
Medina.
Aye. Okay, now we'll move on to no draft ordinances. We'll move on to 9 on our agenda, city attorney report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one item to report on. Last Thursday, I attended a seminar in Montrose concerning building security and infrastructure security, and it was sponsored by CIRSA, our intergovernmental insurance pool. A very enlightening discussion, and I'm going to kind of download on the city manager and the general services director and kind of let them know some of the tips and pointers that the consultant that gave the presentation, he was a nationally known security consultant, and he had a lot of good recommendations that weren't necessarily things that would cost a lot of money, but were more of a common sense thing that you wouldn't maybe think of doing until somebody pointed it out. And most of his job, other than doing these presentations, is he gets hired by both private and public entities to break into their facilities and then tell them where their vulnerabilities are. And he, he had some good ideas, and just in terms of the locks that we may have on our doors, and storage of important records, and that sort of thing. And so it was very valuable and very eye-opening in certain respects, but well worth the trip, I thought. So, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to 10 on the agenda, city manager's report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I've just got 2 items this evening. The first is to remind the community that there's still time to apply for the community support grant. The application period closes this coming Friday at 5 p.m. Anyone still wishing to apply can find the application on the city website by typing, quote, community grant form, unquote, in the search bar. A meeting for the selection committee is scheduled to occur on October 20th, with final recommendations to be presented to council in late November. Secondly, I just wanted to report to council and the community that we've had an unfortunate and ongoing circumstance in Montezuma Park that's caused us to take some significant action. A group of homeless or displaced individuals decided to take almost literal possession of the park, especially the bandstand. Some of these individuals began to exhibit repeated aggressive behavior towards park visitors, nearby business patrons, and employees, which ultimately resulted in generating fear in the neighborhood. It has resulted in neighborhood avoidance of the park, which is contrary to our goals and mission. There was at least one event where an individual exhibited brazen harassing behavior towards a group that had reserved the bandstand for an event. Additionally, it began to become a public health issue in that human waste was being found in the alley next to the park and behind the adjacent business. As a result of all this, the decision was made to close the bandstand and install a temporary fence around it. Even so, This bandstand is still available to rent for a nominal fee. We don't want the public to think that it's just closed. Reservations can be made by contacting the Parks and Recreation Department, and they will remove fencing to accommodate reservations as needed. The Chief of Police, Director of Parks and Recreation, and I have been monitoring this problem since the fencing was installed, and it appears the problem is improving, but we're not there all the time. We do have a follow-up meeting with some local residents in a week or so to obtain some additional perspectives and feedback. This is not something we necessarily wanted to do, but we felt it was the best decision to make in this case. It was getting pretty serious over there, so I just wanted to report into council. That's all I have this evening, council.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to 11, our city council committee reports. A is the mayor's report on the workshop. Our workshop had just one topic today. We discussed ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, and kind of came up with a proposal for a new resolution or ordinance. So that's those changes are going to be made, and that's going to be brought to our next council meeting on October 25th. That'll be the first reading, and then we're going to have the second reading on our second meeting in November, the 22nd, to give people a month to prepare for a public hearing or to provide comments leading up to that. The only other thing I have to share is that I personally will be missing our next meeting as I will be out of town for work. So I will not be in attendance for our October 25th meeting. But Arlena's going to run the meeting. So, all right, do we have any other board reports? We can start with this end of the town.
Yeah, I have a report from the Historic Preservation Board. We met last Wednesday, and the board swore in new members Rachel Weaver and Darren Upton, and discussed the upcoming survey of I believe it's 17 of the car culture properties in the city.
Thanks. Dennis?
I had a meeting with the golf course committee and took a walk around the golf course, which was really fun. And they want to replace 3 trees and make 1 pond out of 3, and it doesn't look like it's going to cost a whole lot of money. And they have made more money this year than they did previously. So things are looking really good out the golf course right now.
Great, thank you, Dennis. Arlena?
I have not had board meetings since I was assigned to the youth advisory council board, but I would recommend that the young people that came here at the last meeting that spoke on behalf of the skate park be reached out to see if they would like to participate on that. Maybe we can get that going again. Thank you.
Thanks. Matt?
We meet a week from Friday.
Okay. David, do you have?
The Public Arts Committee met first Monday of this month, and we've explored some really exciting issues that will enhance our proposed creative district that's on our cuff right now, but we're still in the process.
All right. Okay, just a few more things I actually want to share. So SWO's students, the Southwest Open School, they have a government class that will be coming to City Hall on Monday, November 7th, and they've invited City Council to be there so they can meet with us and their students can, discuss issues that are facing Cortez so we can hear from them, and then we can share kind of our experiences with them. So that's going to be Monday, November 7th. And then also this weekend is the Calkins Commons dedication and ribbon cutting, and then they're having a grand opening lunch and tour this Saturday, the 15th. And then Saturday, the 22nd, the Heritage Museum will have their ribbon cutting and opening. So some exciting things happening in our community coming up. All right. So then now, one of our last items on the agenda is an executive session, 12A.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn to executive session for a discussion of a personnel matter under CRS Section 24-6-402-4FI, not involving any specific employees who've requested discussion of the matter in open session, any member of this body or elected official, the appointment of any person to fill an office of this body or of an elected official, or personnel policies that do not require the discussion of matters personal to particular employees. Council will be holding a discussion on an employee matter.
Second.
All right, motion made by Dobry and seconded by Yazzie.
Dobry,
Aye.
Kiefhoffer,
Aye.
Spurl,
Aye.
Brainy,
Aye.
DeHaven,
Aye.
Yazzie,
Aye.
Medina.
Aye. All right, so we're going to go into an executive session. Thanks for being here tonight. All right, the time is now 9:36 p.m. and the executive session has been concluded. The participants in the executive session were myself, Rachel Medina, Drew Sanders, Pat Coleman, David Rainey, Matt Kiefhofer, Arlena Yazzie, Dennis Spruill, Robert Dobry, and Lydia DeHaven. For the record, if any person who participated in the executive session believes that any substantial discussion on any matters not included in the motion to go into executive session occurred during the executive session, or that any improper action occurred during the executive session in violation of the Opens Meeting Law, I ask that you state your concerns for the record. All right, so the next agenda item is public participation. All right, seeing no public, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made by Dobry, seconded by DeHaven.
Aye.
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 Dobry,
Aye.
Kiefhofer,
Aye.
DeHaven,
Aye.
Medina.
Aye. All right, we're done. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, thank you for